Let's see, is this locked or just chained? If it's locked, I'll go to the next one. Oh. Oh, what am I? That's the hinge end. What am I doing? Oh, convenient rock.
So I'm back in the editing suite, by which I mean my office. I had originally kind of recorded some narration while I was driving, but I realized that the road noise. I don't think it was actually causing my microphone to distort. I think it's actually there's like a DSP noise reduction in the lapel microphone I have. I think it was flipping out the noise reduction algorithm is what was happening, but the audio is basically unusable. So I'm gonna kind of re-record that for you. Anyway, what is going on? I am back in central New Mexico. And specifically, I'm on Highway 380, and I'm a little bit north in the White Sands Missile Range. So I say in the White Sands Missile Range. This road that I'm on, I'm not 100% sure, but it's very likely a White Sands Missile Range P route, which are their kind of service roads. It sounds a little bit funny, maybe, to say that I think I might be in the White Sands Missile Range, but I'm not sure. But this area is what's called the North Call Up area. So Highway 380 in New Mexico kind of heads east from San Antonio, New Mexico, and it's roughly the north border of the main portion of White Sands Missile Range. And that main area, of course, is what most maps show as the boundaries of the missile range. But the area that's north of Highway 380 for a pretty good distance, I think almost up to the wildlife refuge, the Sevieta Wildlife Refuge, is also kind of part of the missile range. I think it's BLM land that the Army has some sort of a withdrawal agreement on. So they call it the call up area because it's normally in kind of public use, and there are ranchers with grazing leases here. In fact, there are some ranchers who live in this area. But when the Army wants to use it for basically longer missile flights, I think they'll launch from this area so that they can do longer distances to the south end of the missile range. They will actually evacuate it. So they'll evacuate the area and they'll close Highway 380, and this whole thing becomes, part of the missile range. That's not super common. When I lived in this area back in like the 20 teens, I think that as much as a decade had gone by without that being done even once. But then I know that they kind of picked it up again, and I think they've done it a few times lately. They're on some of these dirt roads that kind of cross the edges of the North Call Up area. You'll find signs that say stop military checkpoint, but they're just like in the middle of nowhere and totally shot up. But presumably if they're using the North Call Up area, they station someone there to turn people away. So I drove up this road a ways with the goal of getting to a repeater site. But when I got up to the top of this road, not a fair distance before the repeater site, there was a cattle gate that was in the worst condition I have ever seen. It was like barely holding together, and someone had used paracord to like tension it between the remains of a fence. It looked like if I opened it, I was not going to get it closed again without kind of MacGyvering something with rope, and I didn't have any with me, so I didn't want to mess with it and turned back. But I still thought I'd show you a bit of this because this road, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this road may have originally been graded all the way out, basically from the highway to the repeater site by AT&T, because it's got a couple of hallmarks of AT&T construction. One of them is the use of kind of the stout wide wooden posts where there are drop-offs on the side. That seems to be typical on other AT&T constructed roads in New Mexico. but also there is a lovely hand-painted sign warning of the kind of abrupt blind curves. So I'll try to edit this together, right, so that you're seeing that sign right now, and if so, I hope that you will be impressed by my video production skill set.
So these repeater stations are spaced every 4 miles on the cable. That's for L-3I. It varied by system. And perhaps, kind of counterintuitively, as time went on, the repeater spacing tended to get closer as they built higher bandwidth coaxial systems. Old open wire pole on the right there. And you can see some up on the hill as well. So there's an open wire out along here. But the fact that they're every 4 miles does, and they're all, I think, pretty much intact and in the same condition out here, creates a certain amount of, if getting to one of them turns out a little difficult, just try the next one. So I'm heading just further down the highway right now. It's probably about 5 miles further just because of how the access roads work out, maybe even 6. I need to keep an eye out for the marker post that'll be on it. Here we go. And my camera bag goes straight to the floor. So the marker post was there. This is going to be the right road. Someone went to the trouble to put up that stop sign on it. So, oh, you know what? This is probably access to where someone lives because it looks like there's a telephone line that runs along this. But I don't know. I think I'm going to be diverging at a fork at some point from that. But that might bode well for the maintenance state of this road. You can see you can see those telephone splice boxes periodically along here. Because I can see that up ahead I have to cross through some washes. And that can be the most difficult thing by far out here is just how deeply the road has been scoured at a wash. I don't always have the approach angle for it. Check out this old ranch headquarters here, though. That's pretty cool. I think that's probably where the phone line is running. I don't know if that's currently occupied or not. I think this is my road heading off this way. At some point, I think this was maybe paved because that looked like some old pavement there. Probably just this wash section here so that it wouldn't wash out. Yeah, that looked like the worst spot, and that wasn't really that bad at all. I only scraped my radiator shield a little. Well, a little front bumper digging there. So AT&T built most of the roads that are used to access these because there just wasn't much out here at the time this was built. And you can kind of tell the AT&T access roads because they'd use these stout wooden posts to kind of mark anywhere there was a wash. I'm not actually 100% sure why these are here. Maybe just to make the route of the road more clear as it becomes the access road to the site. There's a bunch of rhinoster bush here. I gotta try to step through without stabbing myself. The access road's pretty overgrown, so I don't think anyone's been out here for some time. I think this is going to be your normal warning sign verbiage about interfering with the Defense Communications Facility, but it's much too sun-faded to read now. The gate was open when I got here, but the door isn't open. I was kind of hoping it would be. Some of these sites, the door is just hanging open. But I bet this one is probably locked, and I'm not going to force it. It's a little windy here. I hope Yep, good and sturdy. But this is what an L-3I repeater site looks at. Looks at? This is what one looks like. I'm in a little bit of a hurry, as I said, so hopefully I'm not too incoherent. Let's kind of take a look at the features. So here's our cable route. We can see right-of-way marker over on that ridge. There's a right-of-way marker right here by the repeater, which there always seems to be. And then the right-of-way markers continue off that direction. Route's in a nice straight line here. Some of these posts, I think these were probably to mark the end of the parking area. When these were originally laid out, they like graveled a nice L-shaped driveway around them. Some of them even got paved. If we take a look at the marker post right here at the repeater, we got a few features. This is a splice case, and I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I believe that what would happen is that there's an order wire that accompanies the coaxial cable that's basically conventional copper telephone line. And then they would splice that order wire off into the repeater hut so that a technician that was working here would have a way to communicate with the test panel. That's the general understanding that I have. But you usually see these, and you can see it looks like there's a multi-pair cable going in, and then maybe some single pairs coming out that probably go into the hut. This has had its markers updated a little bit at some point. It's a little, we got a Death Star, a very faded Death Star logo there. So what, in the 1980s probably, they had updated these. Now that's interesting. That would have probably been in maybe the era of the P140 upgrade. I don't know if this part of the route was upgraded to P140. Right-of-way marker number is 3422. 3423 is that one over there. They increment just directly, and they're incrementing going east here. I think that depends. I don't totally know how these numbers work. I think they're numbered off of main stations. So when this is 3422, that might actually be like 22nd. It's weird to me because 22nd marker east from Socorro seems too small, but 422nd seems too big. So maybe they just go directly. I've never really been clear on how these numbers work, so I'd be curious if anyone has a better explanation. When these repeater huts were originally built, they had no utility power connection. So the repeater itself was powered by high voltage DC that was on the coaxial cable. But you can see here that at some point, probably the electric co-op here, ran power. And that seems to be typical of these sites. If I would guess, maybe that was part of the P140 upgrade, I'm not sure. But if we look at this side of the hut, we can see that lower fitting. Let's just go pop that open. It's a big old multi-pin connector, is where a technician would have hooked up a portable generator in order to provide, I'll call it hospitality power, but basically power for lighting tools, and probably most importantly, the ventilation blower. And that's the vent from it right there. And the ventilation blower part was really important because the actual repeater equipment here, I'm trying to stand so that the microphone isn't as much in the wind, and so that you can get a little better view. I need to get a wider angle lens on this camera that I'm using. The actual repeater equipment is all underground. It's all under that concrete slab that you see. The hut above really just contained test equipment and provided kind of a clean, dry workspace for a technician. Because the equipment was underground, things like hydrogen sulfide, is that right? You have your normal concerns about the safety of underground spaces. So there's a ventilation blower inside the hut that ventilates the underground space. And I believe instructions to technicians, I've seen this on a placard inside the hut before, were that they must run the ventilation blower for 30 minutes before entering the underground space. So that was probably the most important aspect of that generator power connection, was being able to run that blower, and of course the lights and any power tools the technician brought with them. But a lot of these sites east of Socorro, I say a lot, all of them that I've seen, but there's so many of them, I haven't seen that many, have at some point had utility power added. So we can see the mast and the meter base for that utility power connection. And then that got disconnected, presumably whenever they turned this system down, which was, I feel like I should know that year off the top of my head because I know I've seen it in EIS. I think it was the late 80s or early 90s that this system was finally totally abandoned. Electrical lines out in the desert, once they're installed, they tend to stay. So that's probably good power up to that point. But, there might be a door that's open somewhere, but it's not connected to the hut anymore. The underground space is bigger in footprint than the hut is. You can see that. And these little handholds, I believe, were used for, I can't even quite tell if I'm pointing the camera the right way right now. Sorry if this is terrible camera work. These little handholds were used for access, I believe, to splice cases coming in and out of the repeater equipment. I don't know if I have any tools that I could use to pop that open. I'll try. I'm a little wary out here. Rattlesnakes are one thing. You tend to hear them coming, but, well, you hear them when you're coming. But there's a lot of hantavirus out here, so I get a little sketchy. I should have brought a respirator with me. I thought about it and I just didn't. But if you're wandering around the southwestern desert looking at stuff like this, very good idea to wear a respirator because hantavirus is pervasive out here. You catch it from exposure to rodent droppings, and it's bad stuff. Let me see, do I have anything else interesting to talk about? I was hoping the door would be open. I know one of them where the door is open. It's a hike to get to it. The road just is just not intact enough anymore. So I don't think I have time this weekend to go to it. But in the future, I'll take you to that one where the door is open. At that site where the door is open, the hatch into the underground space, I couldn't get it open. And I'll tell you, not only was I wearing a respirator on account of the Hanta, there were spiders in there, so I was also pretty much using a 6-foot pole to touch everything. But I tried to see if I could get the hatch open, and I couldn't, so I think it's possible they actually may have welded them closed when they abandoned these, but I'm not sure. The door on this, it's a pretty sturdy door. That lock looks reasonably new to me, but that's locked up and I'm not going to get it open. And I never force these kinds of sites. It's, I don't know. For some people, it's about the legality, but I mean, no one cares about these. For me, it's kind of I don't want to sound too high-minded, but it's kind of the historical preservation, This hut, besides the fact that it's got that creosote growing right in front of it, is in really good shape. And I would like it to stay that way, so I don't want to be the one that leaves the door flapping and then we get all kinds of damage to the interior. I guess maybe I should get better at picking locks and try to get into it non-destructively, huh? There's a work light above the door. You see that on all of these. This is a newer label. It's not that new. We can tell because that 505-835, that's a Socorro phone number. So that would be 575. The 835 exchange is Socorro. But it was renumbered in terms of NPAs from 505 to 575 in, see if my memory is right here, call me out if I'm wrong, but I believe 2009. So we know that this label was after 1983 or something when the Death Star logo came about. It was before 2009. And obviously, I think even before 2009, they would have started using the one-call 1-800 number on these. But that's one of the interesting things about these sites is that they date back to the early 60s, but pretty much all of these looked like they were visited and kind of got some basic maintenance in the 80s. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that was because of the P140 upgrade. There's just a simple barbed wire fence around the perimeter. That's normal. All of these are like that. It's not to keep people out. It's to keep cattle out, really. Sometimes they'll cause damage to structures like this if they decide they like leaning or brushing against them. More so to the right-of-way markers, probably. Concrete pad around it, and then you can kind of make out the remains of the L-shaped gravel driveway that provided plenty of room for technicians to park. Let's take a little bit of a walk. So let's take a look at this right-of-way marker finally. I didn't notice this driving in, that's funny. The pole number, I don't know how well you can see that. The sun is being a little difficult today. But the pole number is 3421 1/3. So maybe this was an infill pole that they added at some point, and that's why the weird number, that'd be my guess. This sign faces away from the sun most of the day, so it's far less faded. I've said before, good indication of a coaxial cable is when it says transcontinental cable route. Other things like telephone cable can be a little ambiguous, but as far as I can tell, that terminology, transcontinental cable, was pretty much exclusively used for the coaxial carriers. I also love the bottom of this sign, because if I'm understanding what's going on here right, it looks like they stuck a newer Death Star logo adhesive label over the top at some point, which has totally faded away. And we can see what I think is the original lettering under it. So this would be pre-1980s. Please call, collect, or notify American Telephone and Telegraph Co., Socorro, New Mexico. That is what the oldest signs say, and of course that AT&T Socorro, New Mexico is referring to that main station. They did have a bit of a customer service role as far as handling things like locating these lines, so that's why you might have seen in another video there's a business hours sign on the gate into that underground bunker, which is kind of funny to see on an underground bunker, but you know, vendors and even like just companies doing work out here sometimes would have occasion to visit them. And then this, let me get a closer look at this, because this is also much less sun faded. This is our original right-of-way placard. So the boundaries of this right-of-way, 16 feet wide. It goes 16 feet to the left, 0 feet to the right. And then cable A is 5 feet to the left. Since there's one band at the top of this post, we don't really expect to find anything here. One band meant it was just a right-of-way marker. I'm trying to look at the next post and see if I can make out, but it's a good ways away. I don't see the bands on top of it. They're not as orange as they used to be. I think I've said this before. What I understand is that one band meant it was just a right-of-way marker, 2 bands meant that there was a splice case, and 3 bands meant that there was a test point. I talk about historic preservation with these sites because it's honestly a real concern for me. We're looking at a remaining artifact of a pretty significant wartime effort during the peak of the Cold War to ensure the survivability of the United States nuclear deterrent. And, you know, I say nuclear deterrent, but we're talking about mutually assured destruction here. The kind of thing that garners a lot of cultural attention, but people don't really devote that much time or thought to the command and control and survivable communications part of that history. This site, which is 70 years old at this point, and which is foundationally, the warning signs at the perimeter even tell us, part of United States military defense, is just out here in some ranch land in central New Mexico. It's in pretty good shape. These were built sturdy, they'll stay in pretty good shape, but I do worry that as soon as someone really feels the need to use this land differently or gets the idea that it's an attractive nuisance because people like me come out here to look at it, what are they gonna do? You know, run it over with an earth mover or some other just really simple way of removing it. And in a lot of these L-3I repeater sites, that's what's happened. Now, it's not like these are a scarce, rare piece of history. There's probably over a few hundred of these. I should put a more exact number there, but every 4 miles for the width of the country, more or less. These western ones are a little different from the eastern ones, I think just because they were built later, but still, there's probably well over 100 that look just like this one. But still, probably 50, 60 of them were removed in California as part of an environmental remediation project. I don't mean to complain about the environmental remediation project. That was motivated by preservation of the pretty badly endangered desert tortoise, which is a good aim. But still, there would have been opportunities to document, to preserve those sites before they were removed. That didn't happen. And it didn't happen just because people don't really think about this thing as being part of our history, part of our heritage, and especially as being part of the wartime history of the Cold War. One of the most significant events that's happened, not just in the socio-political history of this country, but also very specifically in the history of computing and telecommunications, fields that underwent enormous advancements in the United States, and I'm sure in the Soviet Union as well, because of the exigencies of having to maintain a credible nuclear deterrent. I've thought on and off about trying to do something a little more formal just on my own to show people these sites. Maybe doing some kind of guided tour if I could get people to travel out for it or something like that. AT&T isn't usually very cooperative with the sites that they still own, but, you know, these repeater sites certainly have been typically totally abandoned. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. In the meantime, I'm trying to take photos, take videos, kind of do as much as I can to document these sites under the assumption that they may not be out here much longer. I wanted to give you a look at what I meant about the direction markers. And once again, I'm sorry about the wind. I don't know that the wind muff is going to do much for me. It's real windy out here. I might re-record this. But I'm right back at where the access road meets Highway 380 with a cattle guard and a cattle gate here. But this is what I mean. That yellow sign, L-3I, that indicates the third repeater east of Socorro, and it points the direction to it. So all along Highway 380, while the cable parallels it, you'll keep seeing these signs. And, you know, in general, when you're driving in rural areas on highways, keep an eye out for yellow arrow signs like this, because there's a good chance that they, you know, reflect some sort of AT&T infrastructure that's somewhere out a dirt road.